Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be discussing Jon Krakauer's Under the Banner of Heaven. A former subtitle, I think, of this was A Story of Violent Faith, but I think that was for the old edition. So this is a 2011 edition. I think the book was originally written in 2002, and then another edition came out in 2003. But now it's just part of the publicity. A Story of Violent Faith by the author of Into the Wild. And most of us have come to Krakauer through one of those outdoor books. He originally cut his teeth on writing about the outdoors, and my first Krakauer book was Into Thin Air, and I loved the writing. I became introduced to this genre of, let's say, survival and mountain climbing through Krakauer, and I've read a lot of other books since that time. So I think a lot of people have taken the same path I did. They come to Krakauer for Into Thin Air, and they stay around for books like Under the Banner of Heaven. Another Krakauer book, which I've already reviewed for this channel, which I'll link to in the description below, is 3 Cups of Deceit, about Greg Mortensen and the fraud he helped perpetuate, as well as Missoula, which is about the college hookup culture and the problems of rape accusations that come as a result of that hookup culture. But why read Under the Banner of Heaven? Lots of reasons. One is you're going to get some insight into the Mormon religion as it relates to U.S. history. If you're interested in U.S. history and the role that Mormonism played there, you're going to get some insight into plural marriage, not just as an intellectual concept, but how it's played out within Mormonism and what it leads to. You're also going to get true crime. So part of the thread, one of the 3 threads of this story is Ron and Dan Lafferty, who are on the fringes of the FLDS. So if LDS is short for Latter-day Saints, referring to the mainline Mormon church, FLDS, fundamentalist LDS, is referring to those who accept plural marriage. And then there are even breakaway sects from FLDS, and I think that's where the Lafferty brothers reside. And Krakauer also talks about he talks to other contemporary people who are living in this lifestyle, living in this religion, and people who, let's say, apostatized or left the religion. And I think Krakauer wrote this originally, he says so, to understand a little bit more about how faith and how people come to believe in something, and then how it animates their actions. And I think that he's successful in doing this. And in fact, in the appendix to the Anchor edition, so I think a year later, after some pieces had come out from Mormon spokesman, he had a chance to admit to some small minor errors, but also to refute some of the larger errors that were imputed to him. And he closes this appendix in December of 2003. At any given moment, more than 60,000 Mormon missionaries are roaming the globe, closely supervised by church leaders back in Utah, intent on converting the world to Mormonism. These missionaries and their superiors aggressively assert that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is mankind's one true church, and that all other religions are false. If the Latter-day Saints are sincere in making such audacious claims, if Mormons aspire to convince non-believers that their religion is more valid than other faiths, and that the doctrines of Joseph Smith are truly handed down from God, it seems to me that the Church should open its entire archives to all interested parties and actively encourage a vigorous, unfettered examination of Mormondom's rich and fascinating past. The men who guide the LDS Church and its 12 million members adamantly believe otherwise, however, and do everything in their considerable power to keep crucial aspects of the Church's history concealed in the shadows. How such a policy benefits either Mormons or Gentiles is difficult to understand. And I think that's very true. One of the funnier lines in the book for me was someone saying, I wish we could have Mormons without the Mormonism. And for anyone who, like me, has Mormon acquaintances, we know them to be generally kind, modestly dressed. They don't smoke. They don't drink alcohol. They pay their taxes. Naturally speaking, they're quite sweet people to be around. Yet Mormonism, as Krakauer points out, he doesn't point out, he just gives the history of it. You'll have to draw your own conclusions, but strange, crazy religion. and fundamentally rooted in the idea of plural marriage, what Joseph Smith calls celestial marriage. He practiced it. Brigham Young, his successor, practiced it, propagated it, probably ordered the Mountain Meadows Massacre, which you can learn more about in the book. And even when church authorities said that they had a revelation that plural marriage, you wouldn't say they didn't repudiate it, but they said that it wasn't to be observed for the time, because I think they were biding their time until it would be. They continued to still sanction it in private. So they showed their true beliefs by what they sanctioned in private, which was they continued having plural marriage for decades until it was revealed and, you could say, more formally covered up. But it still continues to this day. And the strange thing about plural marriage, one strange thing, is that it necessarily tends towards child abuse. That as these communities grow into themselves and become insular, and off of taxpayer money, they take over towns, and so they're the police, they run the fire department, the mayor, city councilors, school district, and so they couldn't exist without taxpayer money, which, once again, Mormonism, fundamentalist Mormonism, another taxpayer-sponsored boondoggle from the country that was ostensibly founded on a tax revolt. But these plural marriage situations necessarily tend towards child brides of 13, 14, 15, sometimes stepdaughters, sometimes even daughters. And Krakauer interviews people who were involved with it, the women who were married into these situations. And Alexis de Tocqueville talks about this in Democracy in America. America is a land of crazy religions, in part because of the frontier mentality. Anything was possible. You came to this virgin country with no buildings, no established church, no philosophy, no culture. And so if anything was possible, not just with making a fortune, building a log cabin, anything was possible religious-wise as well. And so you've had this proliferation in America, unlike any other place in the world, of religious cults and sects. And Mormonism is one of the most virile of those sects that has sprung up from the religious fanatic soil of America. And Krakauer, in writing the book, he's trying to understand how religion animates people's lives, but also I think was going through his own journey. And this is reflected at the end of the original text in what is called the author's remarks. And he's talking about the importance of authors to state their own frame of reference when writing about the metaphysical. And he says, I happen to find this argument compelling. He's convinced me, the person, Dr. Quinn, who puts forward this idea. He's convinced me that those who write about religion owe it to their readers to come clean about their own theological frame of reference. So here's mine. I don't know what God is, or what God had in mind when the universe was set in motion. In fact, I don't know if God even exists, although I confess that I sometimes find myself praying in times of great fear, or despair, or astonishment at a display of unexpected beauty. There are some 10,000 extant religious sects, each with its own cosmology, each with its own answer for the meaning of life and death. Most assert that the other 9,999 not only have it completely wrong, but are instruments of evil besides. None of the 10,000 has yet persuaded me to make the requisite leap of faith. In the absence of conviction, I've come to terms with the fact that uncertainty is an inescapable corollary of life. An abundance of mystery is simply part of the bargain, which doesn't strike me as something to lament. Accepting the essential inscrutability of existence, in any case, is surely preferable to its opposite, capitulating to the tyranny of intransigent belief. And if I remain in the dark about our purpose here, and the meaning of eternity, I have nevertheless arrived at an understanding of a few more modest truths. Most of us fear death. Most of us yearn to comprehend how we got here, and why, which is to say, most of us ache to know the love of our Creator, and we will no doubt feel that ache, most of us, for as long as we happen to be alive. And not only do I find that passage quite moving and touching, but Krakauer, whether he knows it or not, consciously or not, he's rewording St. Augustine's line from the Confession. St. Augustine, a doctor of the Church, says, "Our hearts are restless, O Lord, and they will be restless until they rest in Thee." Krakauer's discussion of that uncertainty, of that gnawing away at the purpose of our existence, I think is incredibly honest, and something expressed by an agnostic here, and this was in 2003 when he wrote this. I don't know how he feels now. But the importance of acknowledging that there are questions, and they're not simply to be dismissed as questions for the weak or the people who can't deal with the reality of death. That we know that we have a purpose. We know that we were put here for a reason, and we want to know why. And Krakauer acknowledges that that's important. And so in writing this book, he's not just, I don't think his goal was to lampoon Mormonism. I think he simply shows Mormonism, and you can decide for it as you will. But he's trying to get at the question of faith. What animates people? Why do they believe something? And I think he does that quite successfully. It's not something I can necessarily cover in a review because it's the work of 400 pages of the book that he does for us. But I do think that you're going to come away with from this book with an appreciation for what Mormonism is as far as its historical background. You're going to have an understanding of some of its key doctrines. Not all of them, obviously, but some of them. And you're going to get this true crime story. You're going to get this honest look at the problem of polygamy as practiced within this particular format. So I can't speak to polygamy and Islam or other religions, but within Mormonism in the United States, it tends towards child abuse, and that's just a fact, as documented over and over and over, and as he does in the book. And whether the more people come to the book now that there's this television series coming out, I don't know, but I hope they do, because as with films, as any sort of television adaptations, I've said this before on the channel, I don't buy into the book is better than the movie nonsense. It's like saying the opera is better than the poem. They're two different formats. So this is source material, and the other thing is an adaptation for a totally different medium. And I think that reading the source material will really help you understand the television series and vice versa. So watching the television series may make you want to come back and look at the source material. So if you enjoyed this review, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to get more reviews. If you'd like to go back into the channel history and take a look at previous reviews I've done, I'd appreciate that. I'll put links to buy this book from Bookshop down below, as well as a link to the other Krakauer review I've already done, as I said, 3 Cups of Deceit. If you'd like to support this work, please feel free to click over to my Patreon, which is also in the description, and give a few bucks to support some of these book reviews. Until next time, enjoy your reading.